Do you know what I absolutely hate, Carl?
What?
A squeaky disc brake.
No kidding.
It drives me insane. I'm pretty sure every cyclist at some point has dealt with a squeaking or squealing disc brake. It's probably one of the most common mechanical issues you see on a modern road, gravel, or mountain bike. Here at TPC, our pro mechanics inspect, service, and test ride every bike to make sure that they're squeak free, but it's pretty easy for home mechanics to fix as long as they know how to do it. So Carl, what do we need to know before we dive into like a brake fix like this?
Before we get started, we just want to have a basic understanding of how the brake system works so we can target what is the cause of, in this case, the brake squeal.
What sort of tools do we need to do this sort of job?
To start off, you're going to need a hex wrench to get your through axle out. Some bikes, such as the one behind us, actually do have a tool-free lever that you can use. You're going to need a T25 wrench to get a 6-bolt rotor off, or your internal or external lock ring tool for the rotors.
If you have center lock rotors.
If you have center lock rotors.
Yeah.
And then to get the brake pads out, you're either going to need a flathead screwdriver for most Shimano road brakes, or a 2.5 or 3 millimeter hex wrench. Once we get everything off of the bike and start assessing the problem, our fix is largely going to revolve around cleaning and resurfacing all the components. I usually start with isopropyl alcohol. It's a mild cleaner, leaves no residue, and sometimes there are more aggressive cleaners you can use if that doesn't work, such as Finish Line's speed degreaser, or you can just go to the auto parts store and buy brake parts cleaner. It's a nearly identical chemical.
And then sandpaper too?
Yes.
Yeah. Coarse grit?
Yeah, coarse grit works just to be efficient with removing and roughing up the brake pad for the rebed-in process.
Awesome. So Carl, I actually brought this bike here. You can see it. Pretty squeaky.
Oh yes.
What causes this? Like, what are some of the common causes for brake squeal like this?
A lot of the common causes for brake squeal is going to be primarily contamination or glazing.
Okay.
So in the case of contamination, there can be a number of things, as simple as something nasty that you rode through on the road, or like a spray lube could cause some issues if you use that near the bike. Brake fluid, if you've dripped brake fluid onto your brake components, those can all contaminate the brake pads and cause them to make noise. For glazing, that's going to be an issue where you might have overheated the brake pad for some reason after a long descent, or maybe they're brand new already and you just moved a little too quick with the bed-in process. And what that actually does is causes the brake pad itself to form a glass-like layer on the top, and then it does not stick and grip onto the rotor correctly.
Awesome. So why don't we take a look at this bike, start tearing it apart, and see how you would fix this horrible noise it makes.
It works for me. Let's go. Now that we have the wheel off, my next step is going to be to take the brake pads out so I can inspect them. So I'm going to grab a flathead screwdriver and get the brake pad guide pin out. From there, I can pull the brake pads out, and we're going to go over to the bench and start the inspection process. I will note right off the bat that if you're going to do this, the most guaranteed way to go ahead and resolve the issue is going to be just replacing the brake rotor and brake pads with completely new parts. But if you're at home and for some reason, money or time, you're not going to go ahead and put new pads and rotors on, this is how we're going to go ahead and do it. Now that we have the brake pads out of the bike and on the bench, we can actually start diagnosing the cause of our brake squeal. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get the brake spring out of the brake pads and see what the pad material is looking like. And what I can see right off the bat is that these are at least a little bit glazed. And the evidence of that is that they're kind of reflective, and then right in the center especially, they're a little bit discolored. On the edges, they're a little bit lighter, they're discolored and dirty in the center, so we want to get rid of that.
Okay.
This is where our sandpaper is going to come in, because this layer actually needs to be removed.
Okay.
So my first step is going to be to go ahead and grab my isopropyl alcohol and just give the brake pads a spray down and wipe them off with my rag. And this is going to get any surface dirt off of them, so I'm not working that into the brake pad as I remove it.
Oh wow, they already look less shiny.
Yeah, so we can see that already removed a lot of the problem areas. And you can see just how much more dull the surface of the brake pad is looking already. And that's what we want. So then I've got that cleaned off. I'll give it a moment to dry out. I will note, I do have this other bottle of speed degreaser on my bench as well. That works well if the isopropyl is not strong enough, depending on just how dirty our brake pads are.
Yeah. And one thing I'm noticing, you're being careful not to actually touch them with your fingers, right?
Yeah, you just want to avoid touching the brake pad material as much as possible to reuse. We're trying to clean it off. We don't want to recontaminate them with our dirty skin oils.
Okay. So how do you sand them now?
We'll grab in this case, I've got 80 grit sandpaper. That works well, just because the extra abrasion helps make this a little bit quicker. You want to just take your brake pad, lay it flat on the sandpaper, and just, I usually like to go in the same direction as the rotor is going to be going.
Okay.
But you can cross hatch it a little bit as well to help the bed-in process if you need to. I just rub the brake pad back and forth. You don't need to do a lot, that's enough. So we're just trying to remove that very surface layer, and this 80 grit sandpaper is going to do that really quick. And now we can see just how much cleaner that looks now compared to my other brake pad. And that's what we're looking for there. And I'll go ahead and wipe that off on my rag again to get any of the dust off. Set that one aside, repeat the process for my other brake pad. And once we've done that, I do like to clean it off one more time. So I'm gonna go ahead and use my speed degreaser just to get a little bit deeper into the brake pad.
But you could use the alcohol.
But the alcohol would work just as well. In this case, since I have it, I'm gonna go for efficiency.
All right, and now
we're almost ready to go. Before we go full send though, we do want to address the brake rotor as well.
All right.
I'm gonna go ahead and grab our wheel and remove the rotor so we can inspect it a little bit more closely and clean it. In this case, we have an internal center lock ring. So I can just grab my Shimano style lock ring removal tool and get that lock ring off.
Now, could we do this on the wheel? Like leave it on the wheel?
You could, for sure. This step does though make it a little bit easier to get a closer look at the rotor.
Awesome,
In this case, we can get it in the light a little bit better. And just make sure there's no hot spots or wet spots, any contamination that's on the rotor. In this case, it's really looking pretty okay to me. It's definitely well used. We can see just how shiny it is over the brake track versus off of the brake track. And it's got some scoring lines, but nothing too deep and nothing irregular that really stands out to me. So in this case, I think we're mostly okay. This rotor definitely continues to be usable, but I will want to go ahead and clean it off. Once again, we can go to our isopropyl alcohol or the speed degreaser, depending on how aggressive you want to go.
And you're being careful here not to touch the actual braking surface.
Yeah, in this case, I am handling the rotor, but yeah, you'll notice that I'm keeping my thumb on the very edge, the outer edge of the brake rotor, and not putting it on the surface. We're trying to get the oils off, not put them back on.
I've heard of people sanding their rotors. You have thoughts on that?
Yes, that is a viable option, especially if your rotor is especially contaminated. That can get down to a new layer of metal. But personally, I don't really believe in it, especially if you're hand sanding. It's just really time consuming, not really worth it.
Yep.
So one of my party tricks inside of the workshop especially is fire works really well.
Okay.
Because especially if your brakes are contaminated with oil, fire burns that off really well. And so I sometimes will just grab a small kitchen torch. You can also use a workshop torch or mat gas.
Use these for a creme brulee.
Yes. Yeah, so just go into your kitchen and grab your brulee torch.
If you have one.
If you have one.
Yeah.
And that can be really effective for the more nasty brakes, especially for the rotors, since I'm not sanding it and removing that surface layer. This is something I really like to do. I'll actually put it back in the wheel and stick it in the truing stand and just give it a quick spin with the fire to burn any surface contaminants off.
That's pretty advanced stuff, I'd say.
Yeah, I think most home mechanics aren't gonna have a torch just laying around.
But so now we've sanded our pads, we've cleaned them, and we've cleaned our rotor. We get it all back on the bike.
Yep, next step is just to reassemble everything, realign our brake pads, and go ahead and bed them back in, because we are effectively starting with a nearly fresh system here.
Awesome, and if you don't know how to align your brakes, we already have a video covering that, so be sure to check that out. And then after everything is aligned, Carl, what's next?
The next step is gonna be the moment of truth.
Oh boy.
We're gonna get it out of the stand, on the road, bed in the brakes, and verify that there's no more noise.
All right, Carl, so you just finished bedding the brakes in. You used our fancy brake bedding machine.
That's correct.
We don't have to use that, right?
No, so here at TPC, we do have a fancy dyno machine that makes really quick work of bedding in the brakes. But if you're just at home, I just like to find even a small hill that you can do some repeats on just to help get up to speed a little bit faster. And you just want to do a couple medium to hard stops to bring the brakes up to temperature and form a transfer layer between the brake pad and the rotor. So what that actually does is build brake material up onto the brake rotor, and then you're actually having friction from brake material on brake material instead of pure mechanical friction on the rotor.
Awesome.
And that's what keeps it quiet and gives you the power. So now that I've done that and we've let the brake cool, we can test to make sure that we actually don't have any more noise.
Nice.
And we're good to go.
Thanks a lot, Carl. Hopefully this helped you get your disc brakes nice and silent at home. And if you like this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.